Before we begin with this video, I would like to make a few things. Basically, this is a video that I am going to be saying about stories that have been told by EMTs, firefighters, and police officers. If you have a weak stomach, this may not be the best video for you. Some of these stories may contain some graphic details coming from these heroes that do what they can to help and save lives. I will also ask that if you have any questions about, more medical fields, you are free to read articles about them. I would like to kindly say that I would like it if your comments are respectful, as these jobs are not easy. Some of these are short, while others are a bit longer. Viewer discretion as advised. This story happened to one of the EMTs that they went to a school. I don't remember what school it was, but all I know is that it was an elementary school. Basically, when they went to an elementary school, they had been called saying that a young girl who unfortunately got into a big fight with some older kids where she was brutally beaten by many boys. Some of them even had around the ages of 13 to 16. They happened to be around living in the area, and they saw this young girl around the age of 8 walking around at the park near the school. Of course, a man who happened to see the young girl who was lying there not breathing while walking his dog, he ended up calling the EMTs, where the girl was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, the girl had suffered some trauma in her bones, and even at least a few broken ribs. She happened to be alive, as this took place in 2014. This rumor about this girl could have been dead had been a rumor for at least a week or two before it eventually died off, as the girl, we don't know who she is, happens to be alive and living just fine. But although she's now hanging out more with her friends rather than be on her own. I happen to know a teacher who used to work in the medical field in 2000 and 2006. She was pretty much around her 40s, and apparently she had seen a lot of messed up crime scenes. They got a call that happened to be from a woman at the age of 17, where she was driving in her car when she got into a brutal accident caused by a drunk driver. Some glass fragmented everywhere, and even shards even gone on all over her body. Of course, the most damaging thing that's ever happened was the fact that this woman was hit mainly from the driver's side when the drunk driver crashed. She had suffered many broken bones, and she looked like she had been beaten to a pulp. When the EMTs got there safely, they lowered her into the ambulance and rushed her to the hospital. The woman unfortunately did not survive. As a 17-year-old, she had a lot of issues. She had what seemed to be asthma, epilepsy, and etc. Why was she driving while having an epilepsy condition? Only God knows what would have happened. But that still isn't explainable to this day. Many EMTs try their best just so they can get there to the person on time and save the life of someone. They work their hardest to get to you on time. One of people that have been seen in a lot of accidents when it comes to ambulances is that there's always a police there. However, though, this was a totally completely different story. There was a large accident in one of the highways, but of course it was near the intersection to get onto the highway. I won't say where in the area, but apparently a large freight truck had basically slammed his brakes on the red light, which he wasn't paying attention due to him being on his phone. He had crashed right into a few cars, which of course many lives were lost when the EMTs arrived on scene. Of course, the guy was eventually fined with a lot of money for killing the people and for not paying attention to the road. When the police arrived, they checked through and they didn't find anything that seemed to be him selling drugs or anything. But the fact that he wasn't paying attention and he killed these people by reckless driving, his license was eventually revoked and he was never set foot on any of the cars again. This is honestly profoundly sad that many people lost their lives when they got hit in the accident by that large freight truck. Many people still are afraid to go on highways because of accidents like these, but I encourage you to always be careful while on the road. One of the teachers in my high school used to be a police officer in 2008. He got a call from what appeared to be a young couple, ages just 25 and 28. They were driving along the forest side. Mainly they were going on vacation in the summer. However, though, their car had unfortunately had a flat tire on one side. But that they thought that was the case when they actually ran over what seemed to be some sort of pipe. It didn't break their tires, surprisingly though, but it damaged their car to the point where it was broken down. The couple had waited for a while and they were hoping that help would show up, but to no avail. Eventually, there were at least a group of people. They appeared to be wearing masks of animals or something. Unfortunately, they had captured the boy, while the girl, or the woman, was unfortunately violated sexually and assaulted in many ways. Unfortunately, the couple were not seen, so the police officer, who was my math teacher, was in his late 30s at the time of this story. His name was Paul. Paul was actually one of the best math teachers ever, and since he was a police officer for about 10 years at the time, he then took out his gun when he parked his car and inspected the vehicle. The vehicle looked like it had been abandoned for at least maybe a day or two. Of course, it had been a while since the couple had gone missing, so he looked around to see if he could find any clues or any trace of where they could be. But unfortunately, there was no clue as to how they gone missing or what happened. They looked around when he looked up to see that there were more people. They happened to be wearing masks and ended up holding what seems like machetes, axes, and clubs. He looked over at the man, and of course, my math teacher pulls out a gun and tells him to get back. He calls in for backup, and the men tried to go after him, but he eventually starts running as fast as he could. He had to use what he could to defend himself. The police and backup arrived, and they arrest the men, but when they found the couple, they were in body bags. They were bloodied, they were assaulted, they were dead. There was no trace of them being alive. But however, though, the car was towed and they ended up selling the car once they cleaned it up. Apparently at the story, the time of this incident was when everything changed. Unfortunately, though, since the couple were not alive, the teacher, Paul, who happened to be an officer looking at clues, and he has been on other cases as well. He quit his job after this incident as he has never seen anything like this. He doesn't even know what would have happened to him if he stayed in there any longer. Chances are that those people could have murdered him like how they did with the couple. He still has no idea who they are. But this was honestly one of the horrifying experiences he's ever had to go through as an officer. This story just happened just recently in my hometown. And I'm not going to say where it is for obvious reasons. But apparently one of the houses in my hometown that was not far from a high school, probably at least a couple blocks down or streets down, a couple houses were set on fire by something. Of course, it was around midday, but however, though, that was when after it happened. I think sometime in the morning was when a fire started. The firefighters came in and they did what they could to put out the fire. The people that ran out of their house, one of them was a 14-year-old girl. The other was a mom who appeared to be maybe in her 40s. And another appeared to be another woman maybe in her 60s. And a few other people that managed to got out. They lost pretty much everything. They lost their house, clothes, furniture, everything. It was very sad to see them that they had no insurance. So instead of being homeless on the streets after this, they ended up going over to at least a few friends who would let them stay with them until they can find another house and etc. This story is one of the scariest ones firefighters have to deal with. But however, though, all of them are scary when involving fire. This just comes to show you that many firefighters have to deal with on a daily basis. Whatever it be an electrical fire, fires that start randomly, sparks, anything can start a fire if you're not careful. This was profoundly sad, and I still feel bad for that family for having to lose everything due to that house fire. However, all we could say is that firefighters do what they can to help and save and even put out any fires that have started. This has been told by a perspective of a female who had been living around the forest for ages. Since forest fires are now in the time of season, usually late spring, early to late fall. But of course, this was around the time when forest fires start mainly rapidly. They only start whenever it has not rained for a while and everything was dry. This happens pretty much on a daily basis. Firefighters get called to put out the fire in the forest fires. Many animals die, or even people camping don't know about forest fires, unfortunately die of inhaling of smoke or being burnt alive. However, though, this was one of the moments that happened in a forest fire that actually was the one that takes the cake. Firefighters got a call which appeared to be a person who was trapped in an outhouse when a forest fire was starting. He was stuck and he had no idea how to get out, so he was able to call 911 since he had his phone. Being in the middle of nowhere, and since he didn't have any signal, but luckily he was able to get 911 throughout the first 2 to 3 tries. The signal was weak, but eventually the phone disconnects when the man starts screaming his last few screams when the fire gear burns to him, and that's when the phone disconnected. Eventually the firefighters arrived and put out the fires as much as they could, and they saw a lot of animals were burnt alive, people were either dead or decaying, burned, etc. It is still sad to see that every year firefighters have to go through with this, even in forest. Be very careful for this year if you're going camping, because forest fires happen often, only when the area's been dry for a long time. Any forest fire can start and at any moment. Not saying that it's going to happen today, tomorrow, or the next day, but any day it can happen. I would advise you be careful, especially while camping, especially have a fireplace or fire pit, because anything like this could potentially happen.